Good, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, council members, city officials, and our local audience here and our streaming audience. I'd like to welcome you to the August 23rd City Council meeting. We have 9 items on our agenda this evening. We are meeting here in chambers with limited restricted seating, also in public attendance, and we are streaming live on Facebook and on YouTube. First, I'd like to start out. We have a new member joining us this evening, Mr. Terrell Farrow is joining us, and he is coming in to replace Mr. Shoemaker. And so, Mr. Farrow, I'd like to welcome you to our meeting this evening, okay? And we'll help you all that we can, okay? Thank you very much. Moving on, Ms. Fleckner, if you would, please continue with the roll call of members.
Thank you, President Arnold. Phillips?
Here.
Payne? Here. Nickerson? Here. Tatman? Here. Lewis? Gillum? Here. Farrow?
Here.
Corcoran? Here. And Prohl.
Thank you, Ms. Fleckner. At this time, if everybody would, please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Oh, I'm sorry. We'll do the pledge. We'll come back to it. Yeah. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Sorry, Greg. I hate to have everybody stand up and then have to sit down and then stand up again. So we do have a member that isn't with us this evening, Mr. Prohl. Do I have a motion to excuse Mr. Prohl from the meeting by Mrs. Lewis and seconded by Ms. Nickerson? Roll call on the motion to excuse Mr. Prohl.
Phillips?
Yes.
Payne?
Yes.
Nickerson?
Yes.
Tatman? Yes. Lewis?
Yes.
Gillum?
Yes.
Farrow?
Yes.
And Corcoran.
Yes.
All right, Mr. Prohl has been excused this evening. Moving on, the minutes of the previous meeting have been distributed for review. If there's no corrections or changes or additions, do we have a motion to accept the minutes? Have a motion by Mr. Phillips? Yes, Ms. Nickerson, second? Okay. I have a motion by Mr. Phillips, second by Ms. Nickerson. Roll call on the approval of the journal.
Phillips?
Yes.
Payne?
Yes.
Nickerson?
Yes.
Tatman? Yes. Lewis? Gillum?
Yes.
Farrow? And Corcoran.
Yes.
And thank you again. From here, we move to our reports from our committees. We will start out with Mr. Phillips.
Thank you, President Arnold. Community Affairs does have a resolution. It is number 3 on tonight's agenda, and it is a resolution proclaiming the support of the City of Chiillicothe and recognizing the month of September as Prostate Cancer Awareness Month, declaring an emergency at the appropriate time. Since September is around the corner, I will ask that we waive the 3-read rule. That's all that Community Affairs has this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Phillips. Appreciate that. We will move to now to Mrs. Payne.
Thank you, President Arnold. Human Resources has one item on the agenda this evening, item number 4. It's an ordinance amending ordinance number 100-18 to update the non-bargaining pay ordinance and pay rate for the position of Development Director for the City of Chiillicothe and declaring it an emergency. This is not a new position. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Payne. Moving on, we will move to our Development Committee. Ms. Nickerson.
Thanks, President Arnold. Development has 2 items on the agenda tonight. The first item on the agenda, second read, an ordinance authorizing the issuance and not to exceed $300,000 land acquisition bonds for the purpose of acquiring land for municipal purposes and declaring an emergency. And that's the Tiffin property on South Bridge Street. And then number 9, an ordinance authorizing the appropriate city official to execute a real estate purchase contract for the purchase of the former Tiffin School property and adjacent parcel and declaring an emergency. And at the appropriate time, I'll ask to waive the 3-read rule on both of those. And that's all for development. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Nickerson. We'll normally move to Mr. Prohl. He's not here. We'll move on to Parks and Recreation. Ms. Corcoran.
Thank you, President Arnold. Parks and Recreation has no items on the agenda this evening.
Thank you, Ms. Corcoran. From there, we will move to our, our new council member, which is Mr. Farrell.
Thank you, President Arnold. Engineering has nothing on the agenda this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. And from there, we will move to our safety service, which is Ms. Gillum.
Thank you, President Arnold. We don't have anything on the agenda this evening. However, I did have a conversation with Fire Chief Knotts today about assignment 20-022, which was the $149,833.33 that we had for the new fire station on the west side. He has decided he would like us to uncommit this piece of legislation. There's some different projects he'd like to work on some of the current fire stations, and so that would free up some funds for us to be able to do those things. And I agreed with him, so I would like to kind of propose that to my committee tonight, if you're in favor of us doing that. So then I would like to make a motion for us to commit that piece of legislation.
Alrighty, I have a motion to uncommit the item that's been on committed legislation since actually June of last year, seconded by Ms. Nickerson. A roll call to uncommit that piece of legislation.
Phillips?
Yes.
Payne?
Yes.
Nickerson?
Yes.
Tatman?
Yes.
Lewis?
Yes.
Gillum? Farrow?
Yes.
And Corcoran.
Yes.
And that piece of legislation will come off the committed register. Anything else, Ms. Gillum?
No, thank you, President Arnold. That completes my report.
Okay, thank you very much. From here, we move on to our city service and transit, which is Mrs. Lewis.
Thank you, President Arnold. City Services has 3 items on the agenda tonight. Number 5, which is first reading of an ordinance accepting and appropriating 2021 AARP Community Challenge Grant funds awarded to the Transit Department and declaring an emergency. This City of Chiillicothe received a grant of $22,000 through the AARP Community Challenge, and this is going to go to installing bus stop infrastructure, including benches and shelters and some swings at a bus stop, and some other marketing and advertising for them. So excited for this, and big thanks to Director Powell for getting this grant. At the appropriate time, I will ask to waive the 3-read rule on that one to get that moving along. I also have number 6, which is a first reading of an ordinance accepting and appropriating a donation from the First Capital District Incorporated to purchase new trash receptacles for the downtown district and declaring an emergency. Big thanks to Linda Brown for donating money for us to do that and that group. I will also waive the 3-read rule on that one. And lastly, the number 8, which is the first reading of an ordinance appropriating $140,000 for the installation of 2 electric vehicle charging stations on the municipal lot located on 32 East Water Street and declaring an emergency. We received a grant through AEP that's covering up to $120,000, I think is what it was. My notes right here. For the purchase and assembling of all those. So at the appropriate time, I will also waive the 3-read rule on that. I attended the Transportation Advisory Board, and just a little update on their second quarter stats. Director Powell gave some updates of basically the numbers are about, they're trying to get almost equal back to 2019 in regards to riders in the community. It obviously went down and has been down over the past year and a half, but they see some slowly increasing of that. There's also several grants that are out there that she's received, one being the one I just read that will be on tonight. They also did, I guess what's called a share mobility update, and which was working on call it like a on-demand share program for people. So almost like the city would have a Uber where you could call and go online and request a drive for that. They did a little practice run of that, but that's something they're looking into. And we hope over the next year we'll probably be in a pilot as we test it out. But it's exciting, all the stuff they're doing there, and very impressed with Director Powell. I am starting a fan club of her, so if anyone would like to join, I will be president. So other than that, just they've done a really good job there, and I just wanted to recognize that. Other than that, that is all I have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Lewis. And moving on, not last but not least, is our utilities chairman, which is Mr. Tatman.
Thank you, President Arnold. Utilities does not have anything on the agenda tonight, but I did attend a meeting, the Phoenix Fire Company, on Thursday night. We had 2 guests speak from ODOT, and one of the big things they was talking about was how much the state of Ohio pays to pick up litter, which was $4 million. So litter is a problem all over the state. Another thing they talked about was the speeding and the amount of accidents all over the state. Said up north it's really bad. I-90, they clock them at 85 to 100 or better. So it's a serious problem. And it's a problem around here too. Maybe not 85 down Main Street, but hopefully not. Another thing they brought up was the fact that they're working on Bridge Street, trying to figure out how to help us out on timing of the lights. And personally, 12 o'clock to 7 o'clock on Friday, no place to park. But they're going to try to work on a system to try to help us out a little bit. The first thing we're going to do is move the stop bar back on 23 and 35. So when the cars come off 35 and head north on Bridge Street, the cars will be setting back farther, which gives them a better way to get around. And you've got, I know all of us have seen how they back up right there. So they're going to work on that, so I wish them luck. Another thing too is apparently we're working on 2nd Street, so the Phoenix is having their annual fundraiser on October the 1st. Am I to assume that 2nd Street will be done by then? Okay. Well, if we can't, we need to, well, Phoenix and the city needs to get together and see what we can do because you know what it's like down there on the fish fry nights. And that's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Tatman. Appreciate that. That concludes committee reports, except I have 2 more items that were not brought up this evening. They were both Mr. Prohl's. Item number 2, which deals with consolidating 2 bond issues for the city of Chiillicothe and declaring an emergency. And also item number 7, which is to accept and appropriate funds from the American Rescue Plan Act, and also authorizing the auditor to create a new fund to track the expenditures, and also declaring an emergency on that. I don't have my notebook in front of me. Who else is on Mr. Prohl's committee? Courtney, okay, you are. Would you want to take the role of Mr. Prohl this evening on those 2 items? And would those be, waive the 3-read rule on both those? Okay. We will do that then. And moving on, we move to our mayor, Mr. Feeney.
Thank you, President Arnold. I'll start with comments on tonight's legislative agenda. Item 1, which is at a second reading, we discussed the possibility of passing last week. We paused on that, and I think that was in part to submit item 9, which is the actual purchase contract that accompanies item number 1. And then, of course, I believe item 2 is also accompanying legislation. As we've talked about in committee at the previous meeting, and I'll emphasize tonight, I think this is a unique opportunity for the city. The feedback that I've gotten has been positive. There's been good questions all around, but I would support that waiver of that rule tonight, and passage of items 1, 2, and 9. All the other items that have had requests for passage tonight, I would also support. I'll just specifically point out a couple sort of unique things. The AARP, grant funds, just another example of sort of going out to find unusual or uncommon funding sources for opportunities in the city. 6 is in that same vein, but through a contribution. 8, a similar item. And so I would respectfully request your support of those items. And then just a few updates on the city side. As I mentioned, I think at the last council meeting, city building is now, we've gone back to mandatory masks for employees and visitors, unfortunately. Appreciate community cooperation and participation in that rule. Frustrating and unfortunate, but I think everybody's sort of tracking the news. Good news today on the FDA front, and I think that possibly gives some reassurance for those who may have been hesitant on vaccinations. We'll continue to work closely with the health district to think of any ways that we can promote vaccination community-wide. But again, encourage you to get vaccinated if you haven't already. Hopefully this quells some concerns if you had them, and as we sort of commit to a healthy and safe community. Sort of on that mask note, welcome Ross County students back to class. Unfortunately, I think we were hoping that most of the students could come back without masks, but really don't envy the job of school boards right now and the decisions that the school boards and administrations are having to make. But just, always a happy and exciting time of year. So welcoming those students back. If you see me with sort of bloodshot eyes this week, my son is entering kindergarten. So a different school returning to session this year means a little bit more to us this year. So just thank all the teachers, administrators, and school folks across the county for what they're doing for the children. And I think the decisions that they have to make are challenging. Oftentimes it seems like, the right answers are hard to come by, and there's challenges. And I feel pretty strongly that we have really great and committed school boards across our county. And so I wish them the best as they make those decisions. And then just a little internal information. Councilman Tapman mentioned 2nd Street. We're getting close to finishing our paving program. 2nd Street, we put into the bid documents that it would be considered separately. So we're just working closely with the paving company on making sure that that plan rolls out well. We tomorrow will start interviews with sort of the reduced list of firms that submitted applications for the master plan. So I think we reduced that number to somewhere between 4 and 6, I think. So we'll do interviews starting tomorrow. I think they go the rest of this week. We'll reduce that number down. And I think we had a targeted date of mid-September for selection and to get moving on that process. So that's exciting. And then the last thing that I'll conclude with is that we're hiring almost everywhere. Police department, utilities, transit, posting lots of jobs, city website, Facebook, great place to work, great benefits. And so if you're looking for employment or a change of pace, please don't hesitate to consider the city of Chiillicothe as your future employer. And with that, I will conclude my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Feeney. From there, we'll move on to our auditor, Mrs. Spetnagel.
I have 2 items on the agenda tonight. Item number 2 is tied to item number 1, and that is the consolidating of 2 bonds. The one portion of the bond was passed last week. That was to get financing for equipment that was already included in the permanent budget that we passed. This piece just consolidates the bond. It puts it in one form of borrowing, so that way we save money on fees, and it also commits us to a really good rate. So the second item I have on the agenda is item number 7, to accept and appropriate the American Rescue Plan Act funds. We've received half of those funds. The second half we will not be receiving until next year. We did create a new fund, which we're getting that created now, to be able to track those expenditures. This isn't something that has to be passed as an emergency tonight. We can let it go on for one more time. And that's all I have for tonight.
Thank you very much. From there, we move on to our law director, which is Ms. Villarreal.
Thank you, President Arnold. We actually don't have a report for this evening. We've obviously got a lot of legislation going on, so you keep us very busy. But that's it. We don't have any report for tonight. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you very much. I don't have anything to add other than, and I hate to echo, people get vaccinated by all means so we can stomp this thing out. And I think that's really important. I like to see everybody do that. We move on then to our audience participation. We do have a rule that limits speaking to 5 minutes. If you get close to that point, I'll try to indicate to you, to give you a minute to sum up your presentation. Anybody who wishes to speak, we do need you to have you give us your name and your address. There's a microphone over here on the corner, and anybody that would like to speak, please go over or push the button there, and it will turn green, and you're good to go. Yeah, I'm sorry. What do you mean by that? You get 5 minutes to speak, yeah. Yeah. Okay, okay.
We good? Jeff Leonard, 34 East 5th Street, insurance agent here in town on Main Street. I've never done this before, so go easy on me. I'm here to ask some questions about the electric vehicle charging station. I had, and I think a lot of people had, some confusion about exactly what's going on here Friday due to some incomplete reporting. The first thing I saw is that the city's preparing to spend $140,000 to install 2 new charging stations for EVs on Water Street, which I understand is going to take up 4 more spaces in that lot. If I'm wrong, just let me know. Then I found out there's a grant. So it's like, okay, that's, that sounds potentially good. What's going on there? What I saw was that the cost was fully covered by the grant, and then I saw that that's actually not the case. I think according to comments you made, President Arnold, to Litter Media. And so the last I saw, we're talking about $144,000, $125,000 of which is covered by grants from AEP, which I believe leaves taxpayers on the hook for around $19,000, $20,000. Is that right, or are we off base on this?
Mr. Leonard, I will help you. I'll answer you for
Yeah,
you.
please.
Or at least I'll start at least since it's my.
Please call me Jeff.
May I call you Jeff? Thank you,
can,
Jeff.
yeah.
So according to our ordinance that we have on legislation tonight, and
Sure.
apologies if numbers were wrong in the media, I'm not sure, but
And let me just say, that's not your fault. Nobody here, I'm
It
not
happens.
upset with anybody.
It
It happens, it's okay.
No.
But, so please, nobody here, I'm saying, you guys messed up. If anybody messed up, it's the media, but sometimes that happens,
sure,
it's okay.
it happens.
So,
And I appreciate you're here asking questions. This
Yeah.
is where this is where you need to get your answers. So it's
Sure.
I applaud you for coming and asking. So according to our ordinance tonight, we have we're appropriating $140,000 for the installation of 2 electric vehicle stations. The city has been approved for $125,500 through the AEP Ohio's EV charging station incentive.
Okay.
So that leaves $14,500
okay,
that we'll be covering.
okay.
Yeah, that is taxpayer money. But I look at it as an economic amenity that we're adding to our community. We could question, how many people have electric vehicles around here. But the nice thing about these, I think, is they have data that you can track, so we can see how often they're used. The ones that we have are like the level 2 charging, which they basically run on it's like a dryer volts,
Yeah.
electric wise.
Yeah.
And in regards to people visiting, it's an amenity that outside of our city people look for, especially when you have the car. When you don't have one, you don't really think about it, but
Right.
people who do, it's an incentive to visit here. And especially with businesses coming to look, they see that we're on the front end of development here. We're not we're the town with the payphone still anymore. So here we have electric car. Wow, this is great.
Progress.
So, right?
Right.
It's a big jump. We're getting into this, century.
Sure.
So, I understand that concern and I appreciate, and I don't know, Mayor, if you have anything else to add in regards to just the details of maybe what the grant is for.
Always.
Mayor Feeney.
So, I'll be the first to admit that I've learned a lot through this process. So we have, I think, what is currently there called level 2 chargers. Those are the ones that take 8 hours to charge your vehicle. I don't have an electric vehicle, but
Right.
I've been trying to learn.
I want one.
They're slick.
I want a Tesla truck.
So when we got the current chargers that we have through the same process, but a different grant.
Okay.
We submit a pre-approval application. In that process, we submitted a pre-approval application for something like, these are much cheaper because they're the level 2, something like $22,000, $23,000,
Okay.
which should cover the cost of the acquisition of the chargers and the installation. The only thing they don't reimburse for is we have a city electrician we pay. They don't pay our salary back. The final cost for that project was something like $30,000 or somewhere between $28,000 and $30,000.
This was back in January.
No, whenever the last one was approved, the ones that are in now.
Okay.
So when we submitted that full cost to AEP, even though we were pre-approved for 22, they covered the whole thing.
Okay.
So what we submitted this time, we've got a pretty good relationship with AEP. They contacted the person that worked on the first grant and said, hey, we've got a small window where if you want, you can apply for these level 3s. These are the fast chargers.
Yeah.
And what I didn't put together is The fast chargers are the ones that really attract people from out of town, right?
Right.
Because you can fill up like you're going to the gas station.
Right.
Spending 8 hours downtown is all right, but if you're coming through town, so anyway. So we put in a pre-application for this one for 125.5. That's what you've seen. We put in the ordinance request for up to 140 in the event that the cost of installation exceeds the 125.5.
Okay.
The machines themselves, the hardware, is around 118.
Okay.
So then you got a gap of 7 that we have to fill. She mentioned, Councilwoman Lewis mentioned dryer electricity. Not an electrician. The electric infrastructure that's needed for the level 3s is greater than the infrastructure that's needed for the level 2s. So there's a upgrade that we'll have to pay for that AEP themselves does, but I think it's like a different, under a different silo in AEP. Add that to the 117. Then you add in, like we'll go out to State Electric or something and buy our materials it'll need. We'll buy signage, we'll buy all those different things. That will, without a doubt, exceed 125.5. We don't think it'll hit 140.
Okay.
When we're done, we will ask nicely for them to pay for the whole thing.
Okay.
But the 15,000 difference that Courtney mentioned is in case it doesn't, right?
Okay.
So we know that we're certain we'll be on the hook for more than, well, 125.5 won't cover the whole thing.
Right.
We think that there's a chance that if we're nice, they'll pay for the whole thing.
So we're depending on them to say, okay, we'll take care of this for you.
Yeah, the worst case scenario is the worst case scenario. Well, it's not the worst case scenario. Something could come back and say there's rotten wires under the parking lot, and
Right.
you have to dig up the whole parking lot. This is going to be $10,000 more.
Unknown.
But if it's yeah.
Right.
But the reality is, what we think we're probably somewhere in the low 130s for the whole project cost.
Okay.
Now I'll say like that. You know, to Courtney's point about economic development, the interesting thing to me has been these chargers are slow, but we've still had like over 100 unique visitors use them, and for the slow ones. And if you, I suppose
Since when? When do we start these?
last year at this time, sometime in August.
So we've had them for a year. Okay.
Yeah, that's unique. You can somehow track unique riders, not riders, but users. And then you can also track the frequency, how many different trips. What I'm really curious to see is how many unique riders there are or users when it's a half-hour charge, right? Because what I've learned is that people, I wouldn't say they plan their vacations based on where there's charging stations, but they do plan their stops.
Yeah.
And Tesla, you want the truck, they thought it was smart enough to build, foot the cost for the ones that they put out on Bridge Street.
Right.
Now what we're doing is attracting people downtown. So I think the question really is, without the grant, which we have, should the city be considering investing full freight in putting them downtown anyway because of the economic development upside? We don't have to ask that question tonight because we don't have to do it. But the anecdotal feedback that I've gotten from small business owners downtown is that they're appreciative that we're attracting new people downtown. Oh, there's somebody found my shop because they stopped at this charging station. And so I've been enlightened on that front because I just thought it'd be like a residential thing. I have heard people say, well, I work downtown, now I can charge my car downtown while I work. But those are just some of the things. And like I said, I'm giving you ranges because those numbers are sure.
So that brings up another question. So what the ones we have don't accomplish the goal necessarily, it sounds like, of bringing in new people because you got to sit there for 8 hours to become fully charged. It's just not realistic.
No, I didn't say that. 120 unique visitors in a year, that's 10 a month. They might all be Ross County residents. I don't know.
I guess, and my point is that the ones that we have aren't the ones that are like the good ones. We're bringing in the good ones, and we think it's going to.
I don't know enough about electric vehicles. I think they're pretty good. I just don't think they're as fast.
Well, what I mean is the whole idea that somebody has to sit there for 8 hours to get the full charge.
Yeah.
That's something not a lot of people are going to have 8 hours to sit around and wait on this.
But I would liken it more closely to, have you ever pulled up to a gas station and not filled up the tank, where you filled up before you're totally empty? Right? Oh, I got a half tank, I'm going to fill up anyway because I'm doing something. So you still get a benefit if you park there for 2 hours. They're just slower, right?
Like charging your phone.
Fair.
Yeah. Correct. Yeah, I plug in my phone all the time. I don't only plug it in when the battery's completely drained.
Okay.
I like that one. That was better than the gas.
I know. I liked it better. I'm sorry.
I was grasping for straws there.
Well, and I just did a quick search. I mean, City of Columbus has 657 public charging stations right now, and I mean, there are grants right now that are popping up this past year, left and right. They're building, I think, another like 500 that are coming over the state of Ohio just by doing a quick news search. So, and I can tell you too that I've had several people say like, I'm so excited there are because I can drive my car now and park and just know that even if I don't need to charge it, knowing that there's a thing there in case, you know, if I'm downtown, that I can do that. And you can, you know, electric car people have like apps where you can search where they are and everything like that. So, in regards to, you know, probably the one thing was be, you know, potentially charging. Like right now we have it, it's free. And that's, you know, potentially something that we're going to look at. There's, I think, you know, I would potentially like $1.60 an hour, you know, and that's something I don't think people would balk at of having to pay. And that's, you know, a way that we can, I mean, it's not going to be huge revenue, but enough that people would understand payment. So there's something coming back into it on some level. There's subscription-based ones, you know, you can just, you know, $20 a month and you can go use it anytime.
So
That's something I think we'll explore as we get them in
owns
there.
these? Does the city own these things, or does AEP own them? So
City.
the city owns them. What maintenance is involved in these things? Okay. I mean, obviously that's a commitment, and maybe it's nothing. Maybe it's minimal. I don't know. I'm like you. I don't know that much about it. But it, you know, that would be a commitment. Is it city employees or AEP or contractors who do the installation?
It is at least city employees.
Okay.
And the other thing I'll say is, you know, you got my cell phone. I don't come fully equipped to answer these
I
questions.
understand. No, yeah.
We had a committee meeting on
Yeah.
it, so I just want to. So I do know that we work in conjunction with AEP, like that $5,700 upgrade. I know is an upgrade to actually get the service to the place,
Okay.
and then connecting it up. A lot of times what we'll have is our city electrician will work in conjunction with a contractor or something else. That is anticipated in that $15,000 difference.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So there are certain things. This will be the second time our electrician has worked on installing, but on the first round I would have expected, well, you know, maybe more likely that we'll call for outside.
Okay. So related to the idea of an ongoing future cost, insurance, I believe, and this is my wheelhouse, we're going to have a cost of insurance related to these, I think, because somebody sent me an article with some of the requirements of participating in the program. What's the city's increased insurance cost?
We will find out at renewal.
So we don't know that
I don't
yet?
know at this point.
Okay.
I mean, I don't know what we had on the increase from the last to this one, and I don't know what the difference in the value. I mean, if the difference in value between phase 2 and phase 3 is $100,000, then I guess we have to insure them for $100,000 more dollars.
Okay.
I think we've already been assessed. I mean, the county auditor at some point asked a similar question: who owns them for
Yeah.
property values? You know, for that assessment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, honestly, just knowing the business and how it works, the cost of insurance wouldn't be a deal breaker. I would be very surprised if that was the case, but it's something to consider. It is a commitment going forward. Over the weekend, just out of curiosity, because I heard from a lot of people on this, and just out of curiosity, I wanted to see for myself how widely used these things are. And I live downtown, and my business is downtown, so it's no big deal for me to do this. So I went Saturday at 7:30 a.m., 3:45, 4:45, and 7:50. And all day I saw one car there. It was a Tesla from New Jersey.
New Jersey. Yes.
Yeah.
That's awesome. They came straight from.
No, I did. I saw a Tesla from New Jersey. I went again Sunday at 12:30 p.m., 2:45, 5:15, and 6:45, and then 8 p.m. Sunday night. All day long, I saw one car at 5:15. It was a Volkswagen from Ross County. They had the 71 tag on their license plate. So that's one. And then today, 7:30 a.m., 7:15, 8 p.m., 9 p.m., 10 p.m., 11 p.m., 12 p.m., 1 p.m., 2 p.m., 3 p.m., 4 p.m., 5 p.m., 6 p.m., 7 p.m., 8 p.m., 9 p.m., 10 p.m., 11 p.m., 12 p.m., 1 p.m., 2 p.m., 3 p.m., 4 p.m., 5 p.m., 6 p.m., 7 p.m., 8 p.m., 9 p.m., 10 p.m., 11 p.m., 12 p.m., 1 p.m., 2 p.m., 3 p.m., 4 p.m., 5 p.m., 6 p.m., 7 p.m., 8 p.m., 9 p.m., 10 p.m., 11 p.m., 12 p.m., 1 p.m., 2 p.m., 3 p.m., 4 p.m., 5 p.m., 6 p.m., 7 p.m., 8 p.m., 9 p.m., 10 p.m., 11 p I was there at 7:35. And then every couple hours I'd pop over there, 10 o'clock, 11, noon, 1:30, 2, 3, 4, and 10 after 5. And there was one Tesla parked there all day in one of the spots. And it was another Ross County. They had the 71, so that's how I know. And that's a small sample size, I admit. But it is a weekend. And it does cover a weekday. And so we've got these 4 spots that are electric vehicles only, that over the course of a long weekend, essentially, no more than one was used at any given time. And now we're talking about doubling that to say 2 more stations, 4 more spots. And I think part of the consideration here has to be that we do have a parking problem downtown. Now, to what degree, that's debatable, but it's something you hear. I talk to people who see cars parked in residential spots where they weren't before. You know, we've got these meters now. Some people like that, some people don't. So parking is an issue. And my view is that that's something to consider, because if we're going to expand this, we are necessarily reducing parking options, because...
So that's one thing you're wrong. We're replacing some of the phase 1s, phase 2s with phase 3, and then moving them to other locations.
Where are they going to go?
I don't have that here. I think that's still up for grabs. I think we're thinking about putting one at Transit and maybe one in the public parking by the Elks, but I think that's still an option.
So you're saying the 4 spots that are there now are going to be relocated?
I think that's right. I think we're going from 4 to 6, or staying at 4 to 4.
So that makes me feel a little better about it, and that's obviously something to watch, because parking is something you hear about. So that's if we
well,
could.
And I would also say, kind of like there's a parking problem perception, but we've done parking studies and that sort of thing, and I think that is something you hear doesn't necessarily match like the data. So that's the kind of thing we're focused on.
Jeff, I will say we're way past 5 minutes.
Well,
so if you have a summary to summarize, I'll give you a minute to summarize what you got. I know we're way past because we had an open discussion.
Right.
But I think a portion of talking's been way past the time.
So I guess my last question would really be more like a point. And this is something that people have brought up to me, and I agree with it. I guess it's more philosophical maybe in general, but I guess the question is, like, why would it be incumbent upon taxpayers to make sure that people who have electric vehicles have a place to charge up? And when you think about it, if the talk is about how viable and beneficial these are, why don't we see more private investment on private property? Courtney, you brought up the issue of 600 some odd spots in Columbus. I think these are like primarily public spaces, all right?
Yeah, they're public charging stations, yes.
So it seems to me that if these things are as beneficial as they're said to be, maybe they are, I don't know, somebody who wants to make money is going to invest that money to do it. It seems weird to me that it's taxpayers putting up for this.
Jeff, I think we could argue too. We can always say there's always a very specific. We have transportation. We're like one of the only counties here. And have you ever ridden the transportation? But that's something that's a very niche thing.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean that you have to use it. It's just another amenity that we have for this area.
I understand.
And there's probably people that disagree with that. And I know this is a little different, but you could look at anything that we have, and just because not everyone uses it, majority, doesn't mean that it's not beneficial to our city.
But that brings me back to
Thank you, Jeff.
That brings me back to the point of why is it the responsibility of the taxpayer? And the last thing I know, Bruce, I'll wrap it up.
You're way past, sir.
I'll wrap it up.
Yeah.
The last thing I would say is that if I look at our city, we got a lot going for us. I give you a lot of credit, and I have given you a lot of credit. Give you guys a lot of credit, because if you're in charge and good things are happening on your watch, take the credit by all means. However, we have a pretty serious drugs problem here, and we have a pretty serious crime problem here, and we have a growing homelessness problem here. We've all seen it. And so I guess my problem is that when it's all said and done, I'm happy that we're not about to spend $140,000 of taxpayer money on EV charging stations. But it sounds like we might be spending 15 to 20,000. And when I think about these other problems that I've just mentioned, I don't know if that's really the right thing to do with $15,000 or $20,000 taxpayer dollars.
We appreciate your comments. Thank you. You're way past due. Yeah.
Thank you.
See, yeah.
Thank you.
Let's give somebody else a chance to speak in the audience. Is there anybody else that would like to have anything to say? No? Okay. All right. Then moving on, we will move on to old business. Does anybody have any old business they would like to bring up? Not seeing any. Petitions and correspondence received by the clerk.
We are in receipt of a liquor license application received on August 19th from the Ohio Division of Liquor Control for a transfer of location of an existing business for Aldi Inc. Ohio, DBA Aldi at 1853 North Bridge Street, transferring to Aldi Inc. Ohio, DBA Aldi, 1075 North Bridge Street. Are there any objections to this application? Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Fleckner. Anybody have any news business they'd like to bring up? Not seeing any. Committee assignments and meeting dates. We've only had 2 committee assignments since the last meeting. Parks and Rec has a request for the permit to permit the Chiillicothe JCs to use Yaktangi Park and surrounding downtown streets for the JCs and Evening Lions Halloween Parade, which will be Saturday, October 30th. And Community Affairs has a request to proclaim September Prostate Cancer Awareness Month, and that is on tonight's agenda. And that's all that we've had since our last meeting. Anybody have any meeting dates? Our next regular meeting is September the 13th, and I think Ms. Spetnagel has mentioned that she may have a budget review that night.
September the 13th at 6:30.
6:30 here in Chambers. Okay. Anybody have any other committee meetings they'd like to call or hold? Okay. Then we will move on to our legislation. And whenever you're ready, Ms. Fleckner, we'll start with item number 1.
Second reading of an ordinance authorizing the issuance of not to exceed $300,000 land acquisition bonds for the purpose of acquiring land for municipal purposes and declaring an emergency.
President Arnold, at this time, I'd like to waive the 3-read rule.
I have a motion to waive the 3-read rule, seconded by Ms. Corcoran. Roll call on that motion.
Phillips? Yes. Payne? Nickerson?
Yes.
Tatman? Yes. Lewis?
Yes.
Gillum?
Yes.
Farrow? And Corcoran.
Yes.
And the motion has passed. Roll call on the legislation.
Phillips?
Yes.
Payne? Yes. Nickerson? Tatman? Yes. Lewis? Yes. Gillum?
Yes.
Farrow? And Corcoran.
Yes.
And that ordinance has passed. Item number 2.
Second reading of an ordinance consolidating 2 bond issues of the City of Chiillicothe, Ohio, and declaring an emergency.
Yes, Ms. Lewis. I have a motion to waive, seconded by Mr. Phillips. Roll call on that motion.
Phillips?
Yes.
Payne? Yes. Nickerson? Tatman? Yes. Lewis? Gillum?
Yes.
Farrow?
Yes.
And Corcoran.
Yes.
Motion has passed. Roll call on the legislation.
Phillips?
Yes.
Payne? Yes. Nickerson? Yes. Tatman? Yes. Lewis? Yes. Gillum?
Yes.
Farrow?
Yes.
And Corcoran.
Yes.
And that ordinance has passed. Item number 3, please.
First reading of a resolution proclaiming the support of the City of Chiillicothe and recognizing the month of September as Prostate Cancer Awareness Month and declaring an emergency.
Yes, Mr. Phillips.
President Arnold, I would ask.
I have a motion to waive, seconded by Ms. Gillum. Roll call on that motion.
Phillips?
Yes.
Payne? Yes. Nickerson? Yes. Tatman? Yes. Lewis? Yes. Gillum?
Yes.
Farrow?
Yes.
And Corcoran.
Yes.
And the motion has passed. Roll call on the legislation.
Phillips?
Yes.
Payne? Yes. Nickerson? Yes. Tatman? Yes. Lewis? Yes. Gillum?
Yes.
Farrow? And Corcoran.
Yes.
and that resolution has passed. Item number 4, sorry.
First reading of an ordinance amending Ordinance 118 to update the non-bargaining pay ordinance and pay rate for the position of Development Director of the City of Chiillicothe and declaring an emergency.
And that will move on to the next meeting. Item number 5.
First reading of an ordinance accepting and appropriating 2021 AARP Community Challenge Grant funds awarded to the Transit Department and declaring an emergency.
I have a motion to waive, seconded by Ms. Nickerson. Roll call on that motion.
Phillips?
Yes.
Payne? Nickerson? Tatman? Lewis? Gillum?
Yes.
Farrow? And Corcoran.
Yes.
Motion has passed. Roll call on the legislation.
Phillips?
Yes.
Payne? Nickerson? Tatman? Lewis? Gillum?
Yes.
Farrow? And Corcoran.
Yes.
And that ordinance has passed. Item number 6.
First reading of an ordinance accepting and appropriating a donation from the First Capital District Incorporated to purchase new trash receptacles for the downtown district and declaring an emergency.
Yes, Ms. Lewis. A motion to waive, seconded by Ms. Gillum. Roll call on that motion.
Phillips?
Yes.
Payne? Nickerson? Tatman? Lewis? Gillum?
Yes.
Farrow? And Corcoran.
Yes.
Motion has passed. Roll call on the legislation.
Phillips?
Yes.
Payne? Nickerson? Tatman? Lewis? Gillum?
Yes.
Farrow? And Corcoran.
Yes.
And that ordinance has passed. Item number 7.
First reading of an ordinance accepting and appropriating funds from the American Rescue Plan Act, authorizing the city auditor to create a new fund to track ARPA expenditures and declaring an emergency.
Yes, Ms. Lewis. A motion to waive, seconded by Ms. Nickerson. Roll call on that motion.
Phillips?
Yes.
Payne? Nickerson? Tatman? Lewis? Gillum?
Yes.
Farrow? And Corcoran.
Yes.
That motion has passed. Roll call on the legislation.
Phillips?
Yes.
Payne? Nickerson? Tatman? Lewis? Gillum?
Yes.
Farrow? And Corcoran.
Yes.
And that ordinance has passed. Item number 8.
First reading of an ordinance appropriating $140,000 for the installation of 2 electric vehicle charging stations on the municipal lot located at 32 East Water Street and declaring an emergency.
Yes, Ms. Lewis. Have motion to waive, seconded by Ms. Nickerson. Roll call on that motion.
Phillips?
Yes.
Payne? Nickerson? Tatman? Lewis? Gillum?
Yes.
Farrow? And Corcoran.
Yes.
And the motion has passed. Roll call on the legislation.
Phillips?
Yes.
Payne? Nickerson? Tatman? Lewis? Gillum?
Yes.
Farrow? And Corcoran.
Yes.
And that ordinance has passed. And number 9.
First reading of an ordinance authorizing the appropriate city officials to execute a real estate purchase contract for the purchase of the former Tiffin School property and an adjacent parcel and declaring an emergency.
I have a motion to waive the 3-read rule by Ms. Nickerson, seconded by Ms. Gillum. Roll call on that motion.
Phillips? Payne? Nickerson? Tatman? Lewis? Gillum?
Yes.
Farrow? And Corcoran.
Yes.
Motion has passed. Roll call on the legislation.
Phillips?
Yes.
Payne? Nickerson? Tatman? Lewis? Gillum?
Yes.
Farrow? And Corcoran.
Yes.
And that's the last item we have. That concludes our business. If anybody has anything to add, please do. Otherwise, do I have a motion to adjourn? By Ms. Lewis, second by Ms. Nickerson. Roll call on the motion to adjourn.
Phillips? Payne? Nickerson? Tatman? Lewis? Gillum?
Yes.
Farrow? And Corcoran.
Folks, we are adjourned. Thank you. Have a good evening, and try to stay cool.
Press it. If I barely press it, like